from Western Illinois. And I always like to greet my neighbors every day. So this conference is no different. What I want you to do is stand up. I want you to greet your neighbor, and I want you to tell your neighbor a compliment. I want you to turn to your neighbor and tell him that he or her is the smartest looking no-till farmer you have seen at the entire conference, okay? Stand up real quick, greet your neighbor.
You are the smartest. Yes. That's Matthew, is the name. Yeah, what's the name? Satish. Okay. Good.
You're smart looking no-tiller.
You smart. What's name?
What?
Name?
Ted from Kansas.
Matthew from Nigeria.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Where are you from?
Nigeria. Yeah.
Nice. Touch a bit louder.
No-till farming is big in Nigeria?
No, that is why I'm here. We want to start promoting that in Nigeria. Yeah, we from which country? From which country?
Originally from India, I'm now in US.
Oh, that's good.
Mainly revolving around corn harvesting. Some of them are still in the pipeline. And then I founded Counter Corn Heads many, many years ago. I live in Western Illinois. It's silty loam soils. They're dark in color, and they are also poorly drained. So I want to bring you this data from my research center. And I borrowed $500 from Grandma, $500 from the bank when I was a senior in high school, and I bought 10 pigs, and I started farming. I bought my first farm in 1985, and I wanted to pay for it, and I knew that I wanted to farm as profitably as possible. I started doing on-farm research at that point in time. Later on, the folks from Successful Farming heard about it. They wrote a story, and I'm gathered with my neighbors and my friends out here, and we're studying row spacings in soybeans. So I was at 37, 38 years old back in 1992. But I like the statement on the left-hand side of the screen. We can't improve on things we don't measure or research. And all of you are innovators, all of you are no-till farmers, and you've always tried new things, and you learn. So I want to bring to you what I've learned over time. Doing on-farm research became easier with auto-steer in this particular study. I'm planting 15-inch rows on the yellow stripes, and then I got to the end of the field, I switched it over to 30-inch rows, and I filled in all the green stripes on the way back. The yield impact of destratification. A year ago, I talked about struggles with stratification. So I'm going to take a little survey, start off with. How many of you are hearing me speak for the very first time or have heard me speak before? Raise your hands. You know, some of you did not raise your hand, and that makes me a little nervous. Okay, the yield impact. What is surface stratification? And it's simply the accumulation of phosphorus and potassium in the surface. Does stratification, the surface stratification, occur naturally? The answer is yes. And I took some soil tests from some virgin soil. I'm going to show that to you. What is destratification? Simply means we take the high loading of nutrients in the top 2 inches, and we either mechanically mix them back into the soil, or maybe we've got a favorite cover crop that can suck the nutrients out of the surface and replace them down into the root zone. Is there a yield advantage to destratification? I always enjoy talking at this conference, and I'm always honest. And for those of you that are younger, some of us older ones have made mistakes over the years. So some coming to this conference is hearing about those of us that make mistakes. Other people tell you about things that work well. I can tell you that I have surface applied P and K on the surface, and by destratifying it, I had a 9 bushel yield advantage in soybeans last year. When I was in high school, when I was in college, we talked about plow down. 2360, 120 was the analysis. We'd go up and get the cart, we'd spread it, and then we would plow it down, because back in the 70s, the 80s, we knew that it didn't move. Phosphorus only moves 1 inch, potassium only moves 2 inches. But over time, for some odd reason, we think just because we no-till, the phosphorus and potassium are still going to move down into the soil profile. So at the bottom of the screen there, you can see my research plots. I have 60 feet with phosphorus, potassium. I have 60 feet without. 60 feet with, 60 feet without. Over a 20-year stretch, I was tracking the amount of dollars. I was tracking the amount of yield. I spent $936 buying fertilizer to grow $395 worth of grain. Something's wrong. Even though my soil tests look fine, something's wrong. $1 worth of P&K was only growing back $40 or 40 cents worth of grain. So we grid sample, and we all do this, 2.5 acre grids, 1 acre grid. My farm is no different. I-74 is on the right-hand side of the screen. Many of you have maybe been by my farm. There's a little combine up here with the first corn head that I ever built as a yard ornament at my farm. But you can see close to the buildings, we've got a lot of phosphorus. You move away from the buildings where there wasn't as much livestock, and a 32. So I had a 25-pound variability horizontally in my soil profile. Let's look at potassium. Again, close to the buildings, 334 pounds per acre, and away from the buildings, 268. So I've got some horizontal problems going on. So I decided, coming to this conference, we hear people talk about stratification, and seeing is believing. So I got my own soil probe, and I went out, and in 2018, on the left-hand side of the screen, this bag, everything 0 to 2 went into that bag. 2 to 4, 4 to 6, and 6 to 8 as you look across. You have to have a tape measure with you, a buck knife, and the soil probe. So last year I talked on this subject and also at the Commodity Classic, and this year Day2, Randy Dowdy, and myself will again talk about the struggles of stratification and destratification. I told everybody I would give them a soil probe if they would go home and test their own soils. This is the probe that I use because it opens up so I can cut it up into 1 inch or 2 inch increments. So, after I gave my presentation, somebody came up to my booth. It was one of the neighbors. He said, "Marion, I want one of those soil probes." I said, "No problem." He said, "Here it is." He goes, "Well, I flew to the Commodity Classic." And he said, "Could you take it home for me?" I said, "Sure." I said, "But why don't you want to take it with you?" And he said, "Well, because when I get to the security check-in, I'm not sure where to stick it." I looked at my neighbor and said, "You really want me to answer that question?" So anyway, that's what it takes to get the data. All right, here it is. This is my first look at stratification. The average here in 2018, the top 2 inches, was 50. Anybody would look at that in Illinois and say, that's just fine. But it's not fine, because I'm going to essentially grid sample going vertically in the profile. 0 to 2, 108 pounds per acre. 54% of my phosphorus is in the top 2 inches of the soil profile. And as we move on down, the yellow 26, 22, and down at 6 to 8, 44 pounds per acre. So, up on the surface where I don't have a lot of nutrients, or I don't, in dry weather, I got all the nutrients I need up there because there's just not moving. But down where the root zone is at, where my fuel tank should be for the roots, it's depleted over 20, 30 years of no-tilling. All right, let's look at potassium, upper right-hand corner. The average was 250. That's not too bad for my part of Illinois, but the top 2 inches, 428 pounds of potassium, top 2 inches. I'd spread it on top, and it's still there. This is a lot like going to Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Where you spread your fertilizer is where it's going to stay. It's not going to move. Got declining numbers, 244, 172, in the lower right-hand corner, down to 152. 43% of my potassium is in the surface. All right? Does stratification get worse over time? I'm looking at 2018 right here, the upper left-hand green square was 108. 2 years later, 2020, it's 113, and on the far upper right, by 2021, it's at 119. So my excessive surface amount of fertilizer is getting worse. And down at the bottom, lower left-hand side here, the red, 6 to 8, it's at 44. 2 years later, it's 43, and in 2021, it's 42. The top's getting higher and higher fertility. My root zone is getting lower and lower in fertility. I'm going to play a little video for you. The protocol of taking these soil tests is really important so that you get accurate data so that you can see on your own farm.
Hi, my name is Marion Kelmer, and I'm a farmer from Western Illinois. I've been surface applying phosphorus and potassium for many years with no tillage. I had good scores in the top 8 inches, adequate phosphorus, adequate potassium. The problem was I still noticed nutrient deficiencies in the corn plant when it was growing, or the soybean plant. And so then it dawned on me, well, maybe I suffer from stratification. Maybe all the nutrients are at the top. So what I'm going to do in this little video here is show you the protocol that I used at my farm to identify that I had a serious stratification problem, and that's why I had visual nutrient deficiencies. So the first thing we start out with is a soil probe. This comes out of M&M Supply out of Iowa. The reason that I use this particular probe is that it opens up. So after I take the core, now I have access to be able to cut this up into 1 inch increments. And that way I can divide it up and send it off to the lab. So I've already pulled the soil core with this one here on the table. I've got my buck knife, I've got my tape measure, and so simply open it up, and then I cut it 1 inch increments down the line, and then I pick them up one at a time, and I drop them into the appropriate bag here, 7 to 8, 6 to 7, all the way up to the top inch. Once I get it into the bag, you have to go, I park the pickup truck out in the field, and I go around it, probably take 30 probes if you're only adding 1 inch at a time to get adequate amount of soil in each one of these bags. The other thing I knew that the soil's normally kind of wet, and it's pretty tough to get it to mix real well, so I leave these open, let them sit in the shop, air dry for a couple of days, and then I've got real hard little cubes. So then I use a Ninja food processor, and I put all these little cubes in here, and then I mix it all up real good, and that way I've got a nice powdery mix to put into the bag and send off to the lab. When you're done with the Ninja, I go ahead and wash it up, and I put it right back in the kitchen cabinet where I got it, just exactly the way I found it. So anyway, you send that off to the lab, they'll come back and you'll be able to see the different levels of nutrients in the soil profile. At my particular farm, 50% of my phosphorus and potassium is in the top 2 inches, which means half of the nutrients are above where I plant the seed. As always, if you have any other questions, feel free to call me on my cell phone at 309-368-1182. If you'd like to be part of our national team, call us and we'll send you a free soil probe. All we ask for in return is just send us the information. But I can tell you at my farm, after many years of surface applying nutrients, I've got a stratification problem, and that's what's causing me some issues with growing corn and soybeans. With that, thank you. Have a great day.
So, some of you started to chuckle when I said about putting that Ninja food processor back into the kitchen, exactly where you found it. I have some experience about putting it back in the kitchen. And so I came in the house after I'd used this thing, and I thought I put it back exactly where I found it, okay? And the significant other was at the counter, and she gave me the look. How many of you guys there have ever had the look? Yep, you know what the look is, okay. And the Ninja food processor is on the counter, and she has made herself a peach schnapps smoothie. And you can still see the peach on her lip. She looks to me and she said, "Marion, do not lie. Why does my peach schnapps smoothie taste like dirt?" I thought real quickly, and I responded, "I'm not gonna lie. The reason your peach schnapps smoothie tastes like dirt is because you didn't put in enough peach schnapps." Okay, so if you want a free pro and you want a free Ninja food processor, why call us and we'll send you both. All right, purple leaves is a phosphorus problem. And so here it is, here's the data. And I have copies of it. You can call my office or you can pick them up after the talk here. Of all the data, it shows everything, the percent to hydrogen, the phosphorus, pH, organic matter, the whole thing. But we're just going to concentrate on phosphorus. Upper 2 inches. Now remember, the average is 65. That's pretty decent. 65 is the average. In the top 2 inches right here, 46%. But let's look at the top inch. 142 pounds per acre. That is more than double the average. The next one is 97 pounds per acre. I've got declining numbers, and I move on down to the bottom, the red area, and you can see only 16% of my phosphorus is down in the root zone at 47 and 37. That's a difference of 105 pounds per acre. I'm grid sampling vertically in the soil profile, and my vertical problems are far supersede any issues that I've had horizontally on phosphorus. I've got an abundance, and I'm starting down where the roots are at. Let's look at potassium. Yellow, edges, burnt. Same deal. The average was 279, but in the top inch, dark green bar, 569 pounds per acre of potassium. This is 30-some years of no-tilling. These fertility plots have been there for 14 years that I've been tracking the yield. And then 377. And about the only thing I've ever done is really maybe did a little turbo tilling 10 years ago, but other than that, not much. Declining numbers as we move on down into the root zone and down at the bottom in the red, 183 and 177. Where the roots are hoping to find fuel, the tank's empty. Up here at the top, where I have limited roots, dry years, I have all the fertilizer I'd ever want, but it's not available to the plant. So the variability, I'm going to start in the upper left-hand corner here with phosphorus. Horizontally, I had a 25 pound per acre variance, but vertically, I have 105 pounds variability. I need to fix the vertical thing long before I get cranked up about doing anything horizontally. Same way with K, 66 pounds per acre horizontal variance at my farm, but vertically, 392 pounds per acre difference. So last year I told you that I had de-stratified using a moldboard plow. Now don't throw me under the bus. This is 1.6 acres at my home farm. Before I go any further, this is the old tractor I used to plow, and you can see the paint's all faded because it sits outside. But look here in the lower part of the screen, and you can see all the residue that's on the surface. And when I moldboard plowed, I was hoping to get that 100% flip, but I didn't quite have enough tractor, and I wasn't going fast enough, and I only got it to kind of stand vertically. I didn't get it to flip completely over. All right, so now we're going to go take a look at the data before and after moldboard plowing. So on the left side, you've already seen that, where the nutrients are all stratified at the surface. 569 at the top, 177 at the bottom. A lot of stratification before I moldboard plowed and after 20 years of surface phosphorus and potassium. On the right-hand side, I went back to the exact same spot. And incredibly, the averages are pretty close. 279 here before I plowed it, 284 after I plowed it. So remarkably, in the same location, I got pretty much the 8-inch profile was the same. But look at what a difference there is now in the nutrient loading. The top inch, I only have 222, 253, 295 as we move down. In the center there at 377, 337, 320, 392. And at the bottom, believe it or not, at 8 inches, it's still the same. So I thought I was moldboard plowing 8 inches, but I guess I wasn't. So you can see that the moldboard plow has done a pretty good job of redistributing or mixing those nutrients into the soil profile. All right, hang on to your seats. Here we go. Let's look at the yield advantage. And like I say, I always tell everybody the truth, whether I like it. I dislike this info as much as anybody. But here we are on the left-hand side of the screen. This is where it was stratified, this research plot. And we had a soybean yield of 68 bushel to the acre. Pretty respectable. But right next to it was the high fertility plot. The green area is where we went in and de-stratified it with a moldboard plow. And as you can see, the yield advantage, it went to 77 bushels an acre. Sadly enough, that is a 9 bushel per acre yield advantage to de-stratification. Pretty tough to swallow for me, because on 1,000 acres, I mean, that's $135 an acre, and on 1,000 acres, that's $135,000 that I left on the table last year because my phosphorus and potassium are stratified on the surface. Now, are we all going to go out and start moldboard plowing? No, we're not going to do that. So I decided to take a look and visit with other farmers. So here's the data that I got back, and like I said, you can pick it up. So I don't know how many people participated, but anyway, you can see the no-till farmers, they've got stratification on the phosphorus side and the potassium side as well. So I'm not the only no-tiller that's had issues with stratification. Now, we also got responses from people that till the soil, and I'm not sure if they were doing vertical tillage, field cultivating, chisel plowing, and I don't know that we had anybody respond that was moldboard plowing or continuous moldboard plowing. But anyway, here's the people that were tilling. And believe it or not, they've got stratification as well. So stratification is real, whether you're doing tillage or you're not. The secret is put the phosphorus and potassium in the root zone, not above the root zone. On the right-hand side is the potassium. We saw the same thing. 414 at the top, 241 at the bottom. So people that took this probe, went home, put it in the ground, 1 inch at a time, sent it off to a lab. So you're thinking, well, if I'm going to moldboard plow once and start over as a no-tiller, I better buy a big ass tractor and a big ass plow, right? All right, watch the volume. Here we go. This is the one I bought. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 20 miles. We're rolling it over. All right, so I got to tell you the story. I had a dream. And hopefully I'm doing okay on time. All right. So I had this dream. And I saw an elevator. And it said, "Where do you want to spend the rest of time?" I opened the door. There's an up arrow and a down arrow. I said, well, let's see what's up. So I pressed the button, went up through the clouds, opened up, and it's beautiful. Everything's green, cover crops, clean water, no tillers, and we're in heaven. There's drones flying all over the place, strategically placing nutrients, and farmers are out there smiling, and the birds are birding, and the rabbits are running around, whatever, okay? And I also noticed that they just finished harvesting their corn crop, all the no-till farmers that have gone to heaven. They just finished harvesting the no-till crops, and all of the corn stalks were cut up into little pieces like confetti, because if you go to heaven, God will bless you with a brand new set of counter BT choppers for your corn eggs. So plan on going to heaven. Okay, so I said, well, is this where I want to spend the rest of the time? I decided I want to check the other one out. So I stepped in the elevator, I hit the down button, and the doors opened, sulfur gas, smoke. But in behind the smoke was a shiny red International Harvester 1206 diesel turbo. I'm like, oh yeah, that's the first tractor I bought. I stepped up on it, I looked at the seat. It's got weather cracks in the vinyl on the seat. There's duct tape everywhere on that seat. I look behind, there's 5 moldboards, 5/16, shiny. I look down at the hydraulic couplers, there's hydraulic oil dripping everywhere. I'm like, boy, this all seems way too familiar. I looked up front, and the chrome stack, and I opened the throttle a little bit, black smoke, and there's this black gooey stuff dribbling down the side of the chrome stack. And so I opened the throttle, I let out on the clutch, and I eased down on the 3-point, and I watched those moldboards slide in.